Vitamin D. Vitamin D. Vitamin D. I'm shouting that from the rooftops today, and you might be wondering, what the heck does that have to do with you? You've probably heard in the media and in health news that vitamin D is important for our overall health, right? But what we may not be focusing on is how actually it's so vital for our gut health, for gut struggles like Crohn's and colitis, celiac and IBS. Vitamin D is important when it comes to those gut struggles too. And that's what we care about, right? We are moms and we care about healing from our gut struggles. So how does vitamin D fit in there? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea. I've got mine right here. I'm drinking a little chamomile today. Pull up a chair, take a load off, grab something to drink, and join me as we talk for a few minutes about this all-important vitamin D and how it's actually closely related to quieting those gut symptoms. Well, hey there, it's Karen Haley, the digestive coach for moms, and that means that I support you, mom friend, on your healing journey from gut struggles. Healing from gut struggles and quieting those symptoms so that you can be the mom that you always knew that you can be. So today it's all about vitamin D. It's all about how we can use vitamin D to help us quiet our symptoms and get back to being the mom that we know we want to be. That's what we're going to talk about today. And let me break it down just a little bit. Here's what we'll touch on. Number one, what is vitamin D? Before we can get started, we got to know what it is. So number one, we'll talk about what is vitamin D. After that, we'll talk about why should we care? Why should I, mom with gut issues, why should I care? If I have IBS or I have IBD, why should I really care about my vitamin D levels? After that, we're going to move on and talk about how we can get vitamin D naturally in our life. And also, we're going to talk about vitamin D supplementation. If you choose to use a supplement, what would be the best supplement to use and how to use it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's get started talking about what is it. This is a really good place to start. What the heck is vitamin D? Well, vitamin D, like the name says, it's a vitamin. It's one of those vitamins that our body needs. And vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, and it works much like a hormone in our body. Now, the fact that it's a fat-soluble vitamin, that just means that it dissolves in fat, and it's also stored in fat throughout our body. And there's some other fat-soluble vitamins that are out there. The fat-soluble vitamins are things like A, E, D, and K. And so vitamin D is just one of those fat-soluble vitamins. And now that we know what vitamin D is, we got to move on to the bigger question. And the bigger question is, why should we care? Why should we care about vitamin D when we have gut issues? Well, here's the thing about vitamin D. The cool thing is that there have actually been a number of studies done. There have been a number of studies looking at vitamin D and a particular gut struggle, inflammatory bowel disease. So the research results are really fascinating here. They have definitely shown that there's a link between IBD and vitamin D. But specifically, they have found in the research that with vitamin D levels are lower in people that have inflammatory bowel disease. And they've also found that when you increase the level of vitamin D, it decreases the symptoms of inflammatory bowel disease. Decreases the symptoms of IBD. Isn't that interesting? And also, I found this study that I saw really fascinating. So you might have heard that vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin. It means that we can get vitamin D from the sun. And this one particular study showed that in cases of inflammatory bowel disease, it was actually, the incidence of it was higher in the north than it was in the south. So we all know about sunshine, right? We get more sunshine in the south than we do in the north. So isn't it interesting that there's more people with inflammatory bowel disease in the north? Definitely an interesting link there, right? And so also, here's the thing about vitamin D. Vitamin D works on our immune system and works on our immune system by lowering inflammation in our body. Well, guess where 70% of our immune system is housed? In our gut. 70% of our immune system is in our guts. What does that mean? We now have this link here. vitamin D, immune system, inflammation, gut. See how that works? So when we can get rid of the inflammation in our gut, we can help our vitamin D levels. And when we increase our vitamin D levels, we can then hopefully get rid of those symptoms and quiet the inflammatory bowel disease. And if this is true about inflammatory bowel disease, you better believe that it's true about other gut struggles that also have to do with that gut inflammation. Now, you might be wondering, well, do people with gut issues like inflammatory bowel disease, do they have a lower level of vitamin D? Or did it start with the lower level of vitamin D and then that created gut struggles? Well, the research is unclear on that at this point. I'm sure there's studies out there looking at it, but to me, it doesn't really matter. This cart, horse, chicken, egg thing, it just doesn't really matter to me, because what it says to me is I've got to lower the inflammation in my body, and I can do that by bumping up my vitamin D levels. It makes sense, right? And one other thing I want to mention while we're here talking about the research and we're talking about why we should care about vitamin D, one other thing I want to mention is about vitamin D and sleep. And why should we care? Other than the fact that we're moms and of course we're sleep deprived, right? They just go hand in hand. Why should we care about sleep and vitamin D? Well, I have a saying about sleep that I want to share with you. If you're not sleeping, you're not healing. If you're not sleeping, you're not healing. Because here's the thing about sleep. While we sleep, it's our body's time to restore, to repair, and to heal. So, no sleep equals no gut healing. And low vitamin D levels equal no sleep. So do you see how these are all so connected here? If we want to heal our gut, we have to get a good night's sleep. But the research shows that if you have low vitamin D levels, chances are you're not sleeping that well. All interconnected. Our gut, our sleep, and our vitamin D levels. So now the question becomes, now that you know why it's so important for us moms with gut struggles, you know why it's so important to have a high vitamin D level. Now that we know that, the question becomes, well, what do we do about it? I'm so glad you asked, because I have the answer for you. What we need to do first, and really most importantly, is get our vitamin D levels checked regularly. Without knowing what your level is, you really don't know what to do about it. We've already talked about how a vitamin D level of being too low is a problem, especially for moms with gut struggles. But if you have a vitamin D level that's too high, it can be toxic, and that's a bad thing too. So chances are you don't have those toxic levels, but you really don't know what your level is until you get it checked. So the biggest recommendation here is get your vitamin D level checked regularly. You want to make it just part of your blood work. It's really easy to get it done. Vitamin D can be just checked as your regular blood work, maybe your maintenance 6-month blood work. You can just talk to your doctor and make sure that it's part of that routine blood work. Now there's 2 different vitamin D checks. There's 2 different vitamin D ways to check your vitamin D level, and you want to make sure that your doctor is doing the 25 hydroxy vitamin D. That's the more powerful, more accurate way to check your blood work. I know most doctors are doing that one these days, so you just want to check with your doctor and make sure that's the one that they're doing. And now, after that's done, after you get your blood work done, you want to know, how did I do? What were my results? Well, if you have a chronic illness, reading blood work is really one of the most important things that you can do, so that you know you won't have to just rely on your doctor to tell you. You could actually look at your blood work and know what's going on with me, what's high, what's low, what's at the right level, and your vitamin D level will be in there. So you want to be able to know what's a good level. So there are many doctors that talk about a level of vitamin D between 20 to 40 being a good range, being that normal range. And while it's true that that range might be good to ward off things like rickets, there are some really wonderful doctors, functional medicine, root cause medicine doctors that I really trust. Doctors like Dr. Joseph Mercola and Dr. Josh Axe and Dr. Mark Hyman. And they recommend a vitamin D level of a little bit higher than that. So I would go with their recommendation. And their recommendation is that your vitamin D level be between 40 to 65. So if you get that blood work back and you're not in the 40 to 65 range, then you want to take some steps to start bumping up your vitamin D levels. So now that we have this information from our blood work, now that we know what our vitamin D level is, now it's time to take steps and boost it. If your vitamin D level was not in that 40 to 65 range, now it's time to get it higher. And how do we do that? Well, I am so happy to tell you that there are several ways that you can do that. We already talked about vitamin D being the sunshine vitamin. So you can definitely get some sun exposure and that will help increase your vitamin D. But you can also get vitamin D from the food you eat and also from supplementation. Now, when this video is over, when we're done with this conversation, I want you to be able to go out and know exactly what you're going to do to boost that vitamin D level. So go ahead and get a piece of paper and a pen. You can pause the video here if you need to, or you can even do this on your phone. I want you to write this down because here we are at the meat of it. This is the important stuff. So let's talk about the sun first. Of course, if you want to get vitamin D from the sun, you got to do what? You got to spend time in the sunshine. And sure, that's true, but just how long do you spend in the sun and what time of day? And does it depend on the time of year? Well, I want you to have those answers. So let's really break this down. So let's just say that, for example, we're going to talk about me. How much time you spend in the sun will depend on whether you're light-skinned or dark-skinned, and it'll depend on where you live. But I am light-skinned and I live in Maryland, so for me, it's going to be about 20 to 30 minutes in the sun. You're going to want to, if you're light-skinned, you're going to want to build up to that. So you might want to start with 5 minutes a day. You want to avoid getting burned. So you can start with 5 minutes, you can increase that to 10 minutes, and then work your way up to 20 to 30 minutes a day, 3 to 4 times a week. And that should really help you get some vitamin D from the sun. Now, if you're dark-skinned and you don't burn so easily, you might be able to just go ahead and start with that 30 minutes. Only you know what kind of skin tone you have, and that will kind of help you make that decision as to how much time you should spend to be in the sun. Remember, it's not about getting burned, it's about just getting some sun exposure. Now, what time of day? Well, you want to go out in the sun when the sun's exposure, when the sun's rays are at their peak. So that's going to be from 11 to 3 p.m., 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you also want to think about getting the sun in your arms and also in your legs, but avoid that sun exposure on your face and on your eyes. So you'll still want that eye protection and that face protection when you go in the sun. Getting it for your arms and your legs will be just enough. Now, how about time of year? That will affect your sun exposure too. See, it gets a little bit complicated when we talk about this, and that's why I really want you to have all the information so you can get started on this right away. So in terms of the time of year, spring and fall, the tips I gave you are going to be great for that. If it's the summertime, so we're talking July, August here in the United States, if it's the summertime, you're going to back up on that a little bit because you won't need as much sun exposure. Now in the winter, that's probably a good time to supplement because going outside in your shorts and your short sleeves, that might be a little bit tricky in the winter, especially in some parts of the country, right? So in those times of the year, you want to focus more on your supplementation. So how else can you get your vitamin D in? Well, you can get vitamin D from the food that you're eating. And there aren't very many food sources for vitamin D, but the ones that there are pretty good ones, especially egg yolks. I love egg yolks. So you can get your vitamin D from egg yolks. You can also get it from fish, especially fatty fish. And we're talking things like mackerel and salmon and tuna. You can get vitamin D from cheese as well as raw milk. Now, if you do choose raw milk, you want to make sure that you are in good with your farmer, that you know your farmer well, because you want to make sure that that milk doesn't have any salmonella in it. But if you know your farmer well and you can get it, because I know not everybody can get access to raw milk, but that is another way to get your vitamin D. And one other way is through beef liver. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, oh, I'm not such a fan of liver, but you can get desiccated beef liver tablets. That's one way to get them. I do highly recommend the beef liver tablets from a company called Vital Proteins, and Radiant Life is another company where you can also get beef liver. So those are a few food sources. Now, I bet you've seen the fortified vitamin D at the grocery store, things like cereal, orange juice. Those are the kind of things that might be fortified with vitamin D. Milk is typically fortified with vitamin D as well. I don't recommend that you get it from those food sources for a couple reasons. The first one is those aren't really the greatest food sources in the first place. And then the second reason is because they aren't fortified with very much vitamin D, unfortunately. Like, for example, let's take a glass of milk. A 1 cup glass of milk has about 100 international units of vitamin D. Well, if you wanted to get your daily intake of vitamin D, you would need to drink about 50 cups of that milk. That's not really very sustainable or healthy. So try to get your vitamin D. If you're gonna do it through food, try and use those other food items that I just mentioned. So the last way that's worth mentioning for you to get that vitamin D in is through supplementation. And if you're low in vitamin D, you're probably going to need to supplement. But you might be wondering, well, what kind should I buy and how much should I take? And that's definitely a conversation you want to have with your doctor. I am not a doctor, and this information is really for educational purposes only, but I do want to leave you with some good information so that you're knowledgeable when you walk into that doctor's appointment. When you're looking for vitamin D, you want to look for vitamin D3. There is another vitamin supplement, a D vitamin out there. That's vitamin D2, but D3 is going to be a much more powerful supplement, and it also actually has a longer shelf life. So when you're looking for D, look for D3. Also, you might be wondering, well, how much should I be taking? Again, that depends on how deficient you are, but there is a good body of research that talks about starting with a dose of 5,000 international units of vitamin D. So now you have that information, D3 and 5,000 international units. You can bring that into your doctor's office, and it's a really good place for you to start. We talked about a lot today. It was all about vitamin D. We talked about what is it and why in the heck we should even care about it. And we talked about different ways you can get vitamin D in your body. And those ways were through the sunshine and through food, and also just what we were just talking about, supplementation. So lots of information. If there's any questions or comments you want to share about vitamin D and about gut health, share them right below here in the comments. If you want to connect with me, I am always on Facebook and always on Instagram, pretty much daily. I share a lot of information on what it's like to be a mom and how we can heal our gut struggles when we're a mom that's dealing with gut issues. So if you want to join me there, my handle is the same on both, Karen Haley's Gut Love. So that's spelled with a Y. Remember, Karen is spelled with a Y. KARYNHALEYS, Gut Love. So Karen Haley's Gut Love. Come and join me. Join me on Facebook. Join me on Instagram. I'd love to make you part of the conversation. Until we meet again next time here in the Gut Love community, I want to wish you much gut love and happiness always. Bye for now. You're gonna need to take this and so the last way that you can get your vitamin D in is through supplementation. I just spit on the camera. Okay, let's see.